All right, good evening, everyone. We'll call this meeting of Whitehall City Council to order on November the 17th, 2020. If you would, let's rise for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Aug, would you please call the roll?
Rodriguez.
Present.
Elmore.
Present.
Coniston.
Present.
Cantor.
Present.
Peck.
Present.
Morrison.
Present.
Bailey.
Present.
President Potter.
Mr. President, I'd like to excuse the absent member.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Rodriguez and a second by Ms. Elmore to excuse the absent member. Ms. Aug, would you please call the roll?
Rodriguez.
Yes.
Elmore.
Yes.
Coniston.
Yes.
Cantor.
Yes.
Peck.
Yes.
Morrison.
Yes.
Bailey.
Yes. And I'll take a motion to approve the minutes of November 3rd, 2020.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Of 2020, I'll second that.
I have a motion by Ms. Coniston and a second by Mr. Cantor to approve the November 3rd, 2020 agenda and regular meeting minutes. Ms. Aug, would you please call the roll?
Rodriguez.
Yes.
Elmore.
Yes.
Coniston.
Yes.
Cantor.
Yes.
Peck.
Yes.
Morrison.
Yes.
Bailey.
Yes. So the minutes have been approved. That brings us to poll public, and I believe we do have one submitted item. If you would read that, please. I will give you 3 minutes. That's a joke.
Gerald Dixon, 3877 Doney Street. Good evening, council and gathered officials. I hope this poll public finds everyone in good health. I've submitted this message tonight on the issue of kids selling water on city streets. Outside of the recommendations to personally advise and guide the youth on their behaviors by the committee formed to address this issue, which was brimming with conflicts of interest and included not one citizen impacted by the situation. I have seen no other efforts by the citizens' representative body to adequately address the problem by producing clearly drawn guidelines to mitigate and or eliminate those issues at their heart brought forth by the concerned and outraged citizenry, those which have the power to return next spring when season 5 begins. As such, it feels very much like a washing of your hands on this issue due to the hot potato quality given it by some. My well-composed, non-elected citizens' submissions to you regarding ways to regulate sales on the city streets as a means of mitigating the issue that created problems this past summer has sadly gone unheeded, and yet has far outpaced any body of effort that you yourselves have produced as a gathered representative governmental body to address the issue. That which I and other citizens have noted and which I find as a citizen you represent totally unacceptable. This is not at its core a complex or difficult task, but unfortunately has been made so because of considerations of varied players involved, as has been previously addressed by myself and others, and despite the specters of racial perceptions some have thrown at the situation, which seem to have kept you from action, the right of the base situation still exists and demands your attention. The question then is this: will you summon the courage needed to more properly and thoroughly address the concerns and problems brought to you by the community, those you've witnessed yourself and take proper, rightful, and responsible action? Or will you continue to be cowed in your responsibility to your official duties by individuals with unsubstantiated claims and apocalyptic, fear-inducing hyperbole, that which is not based on fact but perception? When can we expect action by you for the citizens' interest, those who voted you to represent them and not just represent or cover for the interest of the government body itself?
Thank you, Julie, and certainly want to thank Mr. Dixon for sharing his opinion. We're going to go a little bit off script. Megan has something to share with us concerning the budget. Is that correct?
Zach's going to pull up the presentation. What I'm distributing is a copy of a draft budget and brief document. Obviously, this won't be finalized until after the budget is formally considered in December.
That's a lot easier reading this one.
Zach, a moment to prepare. Okay. All right. So to jump in, I just want to thank Mayor Maggard for giving me the opportunity to discuss the budget with you all. As you all know, the budget really does represent months and months of analysis and planning, both on the part of our elected administrators, but then also on our appointed staff members. The spending plan that you've been proposed with represents both organizational and department level priorities. And as our city continues efforts to be as transparent as possible, this proposed budget includes a new narrative in the form of a message from the mayor. And what I've just presented with you all tonight is kind of that next level in trying to get the information in front of our residents, a document called a budget in brief. Effectively what it does is it boils down what I would consider pretty detailed line item accounting into an 8-page document full of infographics and charts that hopefully helps give residents that 50,000-foot view of what we're looking at for our coming year. Again, the document that you have in front of you is a draft. Both the full budget document as well as the draft of the budget in brief as well as a copy of the slides that I'm running through tonight are available on the city's website and were shared earlier this evening on Facebook for anybody following along at home. All right, so with that, back to this 50,000-foot view of the budget. What I want to cover tonight is that main spending plan overview specifically for the general fund. The general fund balance, major budget considerations that went into the budget as a whole, as well as a staffing summary. So I'm just going to go ahead and dive right in. So jumping into how the city's budget is organized. Obviously, we have multiple funds. The operating budget is mostly composed of the general fund, the city's largest fund. That's where we find most of where our revenues come from. So for the purposes of the mayor's budget, what you were presented with last week, and for the budget in brief, we focus on those general fund revenues and expenditures. So jumping into those revenues, the proposed operating budget for the general fund includes $33,986,426 in projected revenues. Compared to 2020 projections, obviously we're not finished with the year, but our best guess is that this represents about a 3% decrease from budgeted 2021 to 2020, what we think will be actual. As compared to fiscal 2020 projections, there is a slight increase in local income tax revenue, about 1%. However, that is well behind what we've seen increase-wise in prior fiscal years. So while it is still a gain, it's a loss of sense in a sense. And of course, this is due in large part to the impact that COVID-19 is having on our local business community. So moving along to the expenditure side, the operating budget as proposed accounts for $34,241,906, which is actually a 5% increase over 2020 projected actuals. Major areas of spending, of course, include police, fire, and emergency medical operations. That composes nearly 40% of the overall general fund expenditure budget. Citywide employee benefits, those are the things that are outside of salary, as well as citywide maintenance and expenses. That includes some limited facility maintenance that's paid for through the general fund. And as we'll discuss a little bit more later, it also includes a $3.82 million contribution from the general fund to the fiduciary funds. And that's actually where we fund most of our major capital and infrastructure expenses out of, are those separate funds. And we'll talk more about those later. So what do they look like when you compare them? Revenue to expenditures, there's obviously an offset. So this is accounted for with a one-time spend down of about $255,000, which is about 5% of the general fund balance. And I'm going to touch more on what the general fund balance is in a moment. And notably, part of that offset also goes towards that $3.82 million that we transfer from the general fund fiduciary to the fiduciary accounts. It's also worth noting that that's only partially covering capital funds. There are spend downs in fiduciary accounts accounted for as well. So moving into what is a general fund balance. It represents funds that are carried over from prior fiscal years. So it wouldn't be necessarily incorrect to think of it as a bank account that carries over a balance of money. And when we talk about general fund expenditures in a year, of course, we're talking about what we plan to spend this year. This represents what we did not spend the prior year. So from moving from fiscal year 2021, based on our current projections, we anticipate about a $2.365 million gain this year in the general fund balance. That's for fiscal year 2020, our best guess. But moving into next year, we anticipate that net loss of about $255,000 that I mentioned. However, with that spend down, and as you can see, that's not necessarily out of line with prior general fund balances, we'll still have approximately 1.5 months of operating expenses in reserve, should something happen, say another pandemic, what have you. So back to that 50,000-foot view. When you put together a budget, there are a number of moving parts and pieces, and this was our best effort to boil down those core considerations that went into developing the budget process, and then also how we communicate it. So financial stability, essential health and life safety services, public infrastructure and capital improvements, community programs and special events, and local business growth. And throughout the budget, you kind of see these things emphasized. So to kind of organize the discussion, I'm going to tap on all of those. So of course, focusing on financial stability is not a new consideration for the city, nor would I imagine for any other community, but we do have a long-standing practice of pursuing opportunities to increase revenue without burdening our residents, and that is key, while also finding innovative ways to decrease the cost of service delivery over time. So perhaps the best example of doing that is illustrated by how our local income tax revenues have grown over the past decade plus. So since the city's local income tax rate was raised from 2 to 2.5%, you've seen revenues grow from about $20.7 million to $29 million annually. Again, when this revenue source makes up nearly 88% of your entire budget, that is a significant gain and allows us to make major reinvestments into the community, the likes of which we've seen in things like recent park renovations, the opening of the community park YMCA, and the like. And so while we are seeing, like I mentioned earlier, the impact that COVID-19 is taking on our local business community, we are still projecting that 1% increase in income tax revenue from 2020 to 2021. Again, this is good news because it's our major revenue source, and it is predominantly generated by non-residents. So that actual statistic can vary depending on the year, of course, but we really don't think that more than 10% of our residents actually pay income tax to the city itself. However, they would be paying it to whatever community they work in. So, in many ways as well, worth noting, the growth in income tax and the really just the vibrancy that we've seen in our business community has helped the city to secure our AA- or stable bond rating from Standard & Poor's global rating agency, which was affirmed for the first time in 2019. So moving on to our next major budget consideration, essential health and life safety services. Obviously, COVID-19 has made 2020 a year like no other, and has reinforced the city's commitment to providing high-quality police, fire, and emergency medical services. As previously noted, that accounts for about 40% of the general fund budget each year. But other highlights from the police and fire divisions that are worth noting include continued support support for the Safe Station program. That program is in its 3rd year and continues to provide safe pathways to addiction treatment services. Funding for the police, Division of Police's Safer Whitehall Strategic Plan. Notably, the plan just entered its newest cycle, so the 2021 to 2024 strategic plan is now available on the city's website, and you're welcome to go check it out. And then continued support for the Victim Services Coordinator, which continues to provide domestic violence victims with support from the City Attorney's Office. So some highlights for those. Moving on to the next major budget consideration, and excuse me, I do have a couple slides for this because this year is a pretty major year for capital spending. If you're looking at it high level, you're going to dedicate, or we plan to dedicate about $4 million from city funds to major projects in streets and bridges, parks and sewers, city fleet, and citywide technology. Obviously, the most major areas of spending are on streets, bridges, followed then by technology and parks. This is in addition to another $1.39 million that is also accounted for in a fiduciary fund to support the operations of the street department that is separated from the general fund. That money goes to providing services like leaf collection, snow and ice removal, and the like. Moving on. So, of course, 1 year of a capital plan can be somewhat meaningless, to be frank, so it's really all about what do you do in the long term and what have you done and how do you continue to invest in a city's aging infrastructure. It's part of why we provided you with a 5-year report of what road improvements have been made. So since 2016, over $2.7 million has been invested directly into our streets and bridges. And that's in addition to the $1.7 million that we have budgeted in 2021 alone. Of course, if you look at 2020, that $300,000 seems not in line with trends, and that's correct. We did budget quite a bit more than that this year, but multiple projects, in fact, all but one project, were deferred this year due to the impact of COVID-19. That's why you're seeing that being impacted. But we plan to make up for it. So these are divided into 2 categories. The first that I'm showing you is the city funded, and so again, this is about that $4 million. We also have some projects this year that are going to be funded from outside sources. So bear with me as I read through these. I want to make sure people listening from home get the chance to hear this. So in 2021, we plan to resurface Pierce Road from Etna to Maine, Elaine Road from Etna to Maine, Erickson Road from Etna to Maine, Wright Avenue from Ross to Hamilton, Country Club Road, various sections, Greenwood Road, Court and Place. Let's get that one, mister. We plan to completely reconstruct Chandler Drive from Maryland to Pineview, as well as Torrens Road from Rickenbacker to Powell. In addition to that, bridge projects will be completed over Mason Run on both Elaine and Etna roads. Moving to what I just mentioned with the grant funding, we are very blessed to have over $5 million coming to us in the form of grants from the Ohio Department of Transportation and the Ohio Public Works Commission. The street bridge projects that I mentioned will be supported with over $1.1 million in grants. And there's also an additional street project on Hawk Road to widen and rehabilitate that road, supported by $4 million from the Ohio Public Works Commission, bringing our total CIP budget to nearly $10 million, which is fantastic. So again, point in time, not as important, but the 5-year trend for what we're doing for our sewer system, of course, is a hot topic this year. Over the last 5 years, we've seen over $1.29 million invested into our sewer systems. 5% of the sanitary sewer system is inspected every year. That's in line with best practices. It puts it on a 20-year cycle. However, that's in addition to rehabilitation as needed, manhole inspections, lining, things of that nature. All right. So moving out of CIP into community programming, obviously, hopefully this is not just a pipe dream, and that we'll be able to continue our long-standing tradition of hosting wonderful community events and our new tradition of amazing parks and recreation programming moving into 2021. So we see funding for both park improvement projects, so for that capital improvement side of things, as well as for the programming. So we're hoping to start phase 1 construction for the dog park that we've been talking about with the community for multiple years, to the tune of about $250,000. In addition to that, we see about $500,000 dedicated to parks and recreation programming, as well as the major community events, Mind you, that's the expenditure side. Those community events do also tend to bring in revenue for the city, so that's not a loss necessarily. And then an additional $75,000 to kick off our community arts program. If you remember, that is something that was deferred this year due to the impact of COVID-19. So moving along to our final major budget consideration, local business growth. I think, again, I can't really state, reinforce enough how important our local business community is to us, mostly because of the income tax that is generated, and again, that's 88% of our revenue production for next year. So the budget does include $700,000 to fund ongoing business incentive program payments, and while not accounted for in the budget, the Economic Development Department is really going to be focusing on attracting and retaining those types of businesses that will have physical presence in Whitehall moving forward. It helps things be a little bit less complicated when it comes to remitting income tax. So we want to make sure we have bodies here in Whitehall working safely, of course. All right, so the final thing that I want to talk about from this 50,000-foot view is staffing, and of course staffing represents probably the most major area of spending across the entire city budget. So kind of looking back into 2020, what did COVID-19 do to staffing? As you're well aware, we had 5 full-time and 5 part-time permanent employee layoffs. We also had 3 employees who saw hours reductions. I know we're all pleased to report that 3 of those full-time and 2 of the part-time employees have been rehired, and the hours have been restored for those 3 other employees. What I failed to put here too is we deferred hiring any of our seasonal part-time employees this year. And so we've seen some savings there. Notably, we'll see moving into the next year, we did close the Employee Health Center this year. And then when it came to, again, this is an ongoing discussion about budget, initially because of the impact of COVID-19, non-union employees were looking at a smaller COLA or cost of living adjustment and combined merit increase. But because of an early dividend payment from the Ohio Workers' Compensation Bureau, we are pleased to report that we think we can do 1.5%. Again, that's a combined cost of living adjustment and merit, so you have to earn a portion of that increase. And then based on what bargaining union you may be in, those numbers would see anywhere between a 2.25 and 3% cost of living adjustment for next year. Also notably, and this is really all about future planning, we did have a major health insurance change to a high deductible and health savings account model. While we're not projecting that to save us money in the upcoming fiscal year, that's really a long-term planning tool, and it should really reduce the cost of our health insurance for employees moving forward without compromising their care. So with that, that is my spiel. Any questions that we can help answer at this point?
I have one.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. On our city services, you have 8,115 combined EMS fire calls for the service. Is that just Whitehall, or is that like when we help like Columbus, Reynoldsburg? Is that all?
Oh, I'm sorry, you're looking at the budget in brief. So that was actual calls, but then Whitehall, there was a separate accounting of mutual aid responses, and I believe it nearly reached the thousands.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Yes, great question.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Megan. I think your 50,000-foot view looked good to me in that it appears that financially we're targeting things that were learned in the strategic plan and feedback from the community. So thank you for doing that.
Absolutely.
Any other questions?
I also want to thank you for the presentation. I thought it was very thorough. The 50-foot view actually gave me a really good opportunity to see where money was going from a small, micro perspective. I did want to comment based upon what has happened this year and how we've rebounded. COVID had everybody, a lot of cities, a lot of local municipalities wondering where they were going to get their funding and losing, workers and, wondering whether or not they could rehire them, impacting healthcare and all of that. And I'm grateful, I'm happy that that Whitehall is rebounding. that we are getting the funding needed in order to continue with the projects that we need to continue with, and also the economic development that will help us continue to put resources and generate revenues into Whitehall so that we can, make Whitehall that beautiful place that we all want to live in. And so thankful to the administration, thank you for council for just the view and looking at all of this, and hope that we can overcome whatever hurdles or stumbling blocks or whatever happens between now and before we can implement what we need to implement and agree upon this budget. I might have some other questions later, but thank you very much for the presentation.
And we also need to thank the state and federal government for some of that help as well. Anybody else?
You do a great job. I want to thank you very much.
Thank you, Megan.
Any other comments on the budget? Okay, brings us to standing committee reports. And the Administration and Financial Management met last Tuesday. Our minutes are on file. We have a number of items that will be introduced tonight. And we will meet again next Tuesday sometime after 6:30. Community and Elder Advocacy. Chairperson Elmore.
Thank you, President Pro Tem. Community and Elder Advocacy did meet on Tuesday. We have no drafts or pending legislation. We will meet again next Tuesday, 6:30. Thank you.
Thank you. Brings us to Community Standards and Enforcement. Chairperson Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. President. Community Standards and Enforcement met last Tuesday. Minutes are on file. We'll meet again next Tuesday sometime after 6:30.
Thank you. Economic Development. Chairperson Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. President Pro Tem. Economic Development also met last Tuesday. Our minutes are on file. We'll meet again next Tuesday sometime after 6:30.
Thank you. Infrastructure Maintenance and Services. Chairperson Heck.
Thank you, President Pro Tem. Infrastructure Maintenance and Services met last Tuesday. Our minutes are on file. We have drafts of pending legislation.
Thank you. That brings us to Public Safety. Chairperson Coniston.
Thank you, President Pro Tem. Public Safety met last week. Our minutes are on file, and we'll meet again sometime after 6:30 up here.
All righty, thanks. That brings us to Parks and Recreation. Chairperson Cannon.
Thank you, Mr. Pro Temp. Parks and Recreation also met last week, and our minutes are on file. We'll meet again here sometime after 6:30 next week. I've also been saying for the last few weeks that we were taking letters of interest and resumes for my committee to do interviews for appointments for our Parks and Recreation Commission. And my committee and myself will meet here tomorrow night to begin the process. I'd like to thank Megan for putting that out there. It's a great help that you did on that too. That's all I have, Mr. President. Thank you. Mr. Pro Tem.
Brings us to officials' reports, and we'll start off with the mayor, Mayor Kim Maggard.
First of all, I'd like to thank Megan again for her presentation. She has talents that I don't have when it comes to presentations, and I appreciate that very, very much with her. And I would like to say that the budget is what we hope it will be next year. We're definitely concerned regarding the legislature and how they're going to handle work from home versus workers who have a physical space in municipalities. I know that with every city who has an income tax, that's a big deal on how that's going to be handled in the future. So we're definitely on that. I'm a part of the Central Ohio Mayors and Managers Association, and we are watching that very closely along with the Ohio Municipal League, and also working with lobbyists in order that we can get out the message of how much municipalities depend upon income tax for their budgets in order that we can keep on providing exceptional police and fire protection. We may not be able to do that if we do not keep keep on receiving that income tax money. So, just wanted to let you know what's on the top of my head when I think about next year. Nothing's ever easy. We're always running into roadblocks, and it's up to us to figure out how we're gonna get around them. That's all I have this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. A lot of your administration's early decisions did have a positive impact on this end of where we're at, so I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Well, also in attendance tonight is Director of Development and Public Service, Mr. Woodruff. Have you anything to share?
Yes, sir.
All right. The following officials' reports have been filed in the council's office since our last meeting, and that would be the mayor's report to council for October 2020. There have been no communications and petitions and claims filed in the council office since the last meeting. Ms. Zog, would you call the roll as to whether each member of council was given a copy of each item of legislation listed on the agenda prior to the meeting and including any add-on in legislation?
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Elmore?
Yes.
Coniston?
Yes.
Cantor?
Yes.
Heck?
Yes.
Morrison?
Yes.
Bailey?
Yes. We have no third reading legislation tonight, so we'll move on to the second readings. Ordinance 97, 2020, reclassifying a fund advance as a fund transfer and declaring an emergency. Ordinance 97 is being read by title only. That is all the second readings we have, so we'll move to the first readings. Ordinance number 98, 2020 is making an appropriation for current General Fund 101 expenses, Street 201 expenses, and State Highway Materials 211 expenses during the period from January 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2021 in the total sum of $35,683,861 and declaring an emergency. That ordinance 98 is being read by title only. Ordinance 99, 2020, amending 161.38 of the codified ordinances of the City of Whitehall, Ohio, titled Salary Schedule, and declaring an emergency. Ordinance 99 is being read title only. Ordinance 100, 2020, amending the table of authorized personnel, 161.37J, Department of Economic and Community Development, and declaring an emergency. Ordinance 100 is being read by title only. Ordinance 101, 2020, amending 161.17I, sick leave with pay, and declaring an emergency. Ordinance 101 is being read by title only. Ordinance 102, 2020, authorizing the creation of the Coronavirus Emergency Supplemental Fund 208, appropriating $43,793 from unappropriated monies in the Coronavirus Emergency Supplemental Fund 208 to the Coronavirus Emergency Supplemental Expense Account and declaring an emergency.
Mr. President, I'd like to introduce ordinance 102, 2020, and move for the suspension of all rules.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Rodriguez and a second by Mr. Morrison for the introduction and suspension of the rules on ordinance 102, 2020. Ms. Aug, would you please call the roll?
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Elmore?
Yes.
Coniston?
Yes.
Cantor?
Yes.
Heck?
Yes.
Morrison?
Yes.
Bailey?
Yes. Ordinance 102, rules have been expended on ordinance 102, 2020.
Move to adopt.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Rodriguez and a second by Mr. Morrison for the adoption of ordinance 102. Ms. Aug, would you please call the roll?
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Elmore?
Yes.
Coniston?
Yes.
Cantor?
Yes.
Heck?
Yes.
Morrison?
Yes.
Bailey?
Yes. Ordinance 102, 2020 has passed. Ordinance 103, 2020, approving and making a supplemental appropriation of $39,560.53 from the previously unappropriated monies in a WMPI-TIE Fund 279 to the Air South Urban Renewal Incentive Account 279.00.50006, making a fund transfer in the amount of $39,560.53 from the Air South Urban Renewal Incentive Account 279.00.50006 to the Economic Development Incentives Planning Fund 316, and making a supplemental appropriation of $39,560.53 from the Economic Development Incentives Fund 316 to the Economic Development Incentive Account 316.00.50000, and declaring an emergency.
Can you read that again?
I missed part of that.
Mr. President, we'd like to introduce ordinance 103, 2020, and move for the suspension of all rules.
Second?
I have a motion by Mr. Morrison and a second by Councilperson Elmore for suspension of the rules on ordinance 103, 2020. Is there any discussion, questions, comments? Ms. Aug, would you please call the roll?
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Elmore?
Yes.
Coniston?
Yes.
Cantor?
Yes.
Heck?
Yes.
Morrison?
Yes.
Bailey?
Yes, the rules have been suspended on ordinance 103, 2020.
Move to adopt.
Second?
I have a motion by Mr. Morrison and a second by Councilperson Elmore for adoption of ordinance 103, 2020. Ms. Aug, would you please call the roll?
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Elmore?
Yes.
Coniston?
Yes.
Cantor?
Yes.
Heck?
Yes.
Morrison?
Yes.
Bailey?
Yes. Ordinance 103, 2020 has been adopted. Ordinance 104, 2020 has been withdrawn per the auditor, Dan Miller. Brings us to ordinance 105, 2020, approving and making supplemental appropriation in the amount of $40,000 from unappropriated monies in the General Fund 101 to the Income Tax Refunds Expense Account and declaring an emergency.
Mr. President, I'd like to introduce ordinance 105, 2020, and move for the suspension of all rules.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Morrison and a second by Mr. Cantor for suspension of the rules on ordinance number 105, 2020. Any questions or comments? Mrs. Aug, would you please call the roll?
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Elmore?
Yes.
Coniston?
Yes.
Cantor?
Yes.
Heck?
Yes.
Morrison?
Yes.
Bailey?
Yes. Rules have been suspended on ordinance 105, 2020.
Move to adopt.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Morrison and a second by Mr. Cantor for adoption of ordinance 105, 2020. Any questions or comments? Ms. Aug, would you please call the roll?
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Elmore?
Yes.
Coniston?
Yes.
Cantor?
Yes.
Heck?
Yes.
Morrison?
Yes.
Bailey?
Yes. Ordinance 105, 2020 has been adopted. Ordinance 106, 2020, unappropriating $890,000 from the Tax Incentive Program account 280.00.50000 and declaring an emergency.
Mr. President, I'd like to introduce ordinance 106, 2020, move for its adoption, move to suspend all rules.
Second?
I have a motion by Mr. Rodriguez and a second by Ms. Heck for suspension of the rules on ordinance 106, 2020. Any questions or comments? Ms. Aug, would you please call the roll?
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Elmore?
Yes.
Coniston?
Yes.
Cantor?
Yes.
Heck?
Yes.
Morrison?
Yes.
Bailey?
Yes. The rules have been suspended on ordinance 106, 2020.
Move to adopt.
Second?
A motion by Mr. Rodriguez and a second by Ms. Heck for the adoption of ordinance 106, 2020. Ms. Aug, would you please call the roll?
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Elmore?
Yes.
Coniston?
Yes.
Cantor?
Yes.
Heck?
Yes.
Morrison?
Yes.
Bailey?
Yes. Ordinance 106, 2020 has been adopted. Ordinance 107, 2020, unappropriating $477,555.52 from the Capital Project Community Rec Event Center account 310.000.5400 and declaring an emergency.
President Pro Temp, I wish to introduce ordinance 107, 2020, and move for the suspension of all rules.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Elmore and a second by Mr. Cantor for suspension of rules on ordinance 107, 2020. Any comments? Mrs. Aug, would you please call the roll?
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Elmore?
Yes.
Coniston?
Yes.
Cantor?
Yes.
Heck?
Yes.
Morrison?
Yes.
Bailey?
Yes. The rules have been suspended on ordinance 107, 2020.
Move to adopt.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Elmore and a second by Ms. Cantor for the adoption of ordinance 107, 2020. Ms. Aug, would you please call the roll?
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Elmore?
Yes.
Coniston?
Yes.
Cantor?
Yes.
Heck?
Yes.
Morrison?
Yes.
Bailey?
Yes. Ordinance 107, 2020 has been adopted. Ordinance 108, 2020, approving and making a supplemental appropriation in the amount of $1,805,000 from the unappropriated monies in the Debt Service Fund 401 to the Debt Service Account 401.000.50000 and declaring emergency.
President Pro Tem, I'd like to introduce ordinance 108, 2020, and move for the suspension of all rules.
Second?
I have a motion by Ms. Coniston and a second by Ms. Heck for the suspension of rules on ordinance 108, 2020. Any questions or comments? Ms. Aug, would you please call the roll?
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Elmore?
Yes.
Coniston?
Yes.
Cantor?
Yes.
Heck?
Yes.
Morrison?
Yes.
Bailey?
Yes. The rules have been suspended on ordinance 108, 2020.
Move to adopt.
Second?
I have a motion by Ms. Coniston and a second by Ms. Heck for the adoption of ordinance 108, 2020. Ms. Aug, would you please call the roll?
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Elmore?
Yes.
Coniston?
Yes.
Cantor?
Yes.
Heck?
Yes.
Morrison?
Yes.
Bailey?
Yes. Ordinance 108, 2020 has been adopted. Ordinance 109, 2020, authorizing and approving a fund transfer from unappropriated monies in the General Fund 101 to the Capital Improvement Project Fund 311 in the amount of $1,100,000 and declaring an emergency. That ordinance 109, 2020 is being read by title only. Ordinance number 110, 2020, authorizing and approving a fund transfer in the amount of $75,000 from unappropriated monies in the General Fund 101 to the Community Development Trust Fund 550. Ordinance 110, 2020 is being read by title only. Ordinance 111, 2020, authorizing and approving a fund transfer in the amount of $125,000 from the General Fund 101 to the Street Maintenance and Repair Fund 201. Ordinance 111 is being read by title only. Ordinance 112, amending 135.16C1, titled Capital Improvement and Project Fund. Ordinance 112, 2020 is being read by title only. Ordinance number 113, 2020, amending 135.18B, titled Fleet Reserve and Maintenance Fund, and declaring an emergency. Ordinance 113, 2020 is being read by title only. Ordinance number 114, 2020, amending 135.21B1 Water and Sewer Mandate Improvement Reserve Fund and declaring an emergency. Ordinance 114, 2020 is being read by title only. Ordinance 115, 2020, making and approving for certain special revenue, internal service, and fiduciary accounts for the calendar year 2021 in the total sum of $11,553,378.34 and declaring an emergency. Ordinance 115, 2020 is being read by title only. Ordinance number 116, 2020, making a fund transfer in the amount, should have been an of in there, in the amount of $200,067.27 from the bond retirement account 101-950-57500 to the debt service fund 401, making supplemental appropriation of $200,067.27 from the debt service fund 401 to the debt service account 401.000.50000 and declaring an emergency.
Mr. President, I'd like to introduce ordinance 116-2020, move for the suspension of all rules.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Rodriguez and a second by Mr. Morrison for suspension of the rules on ordinance 116-2020. Are there any questions or comments? Mrs. Aug, would you please call the roll?
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Elmore?
Yes.
Coniston?
Yes.
Cantor?
Yes.
Heck?
Yes.
Morrison?
Yes.
Bailey?
Yes. Rules have been suspended on ordinance 116-2020.
Thank you. Move to adopt.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Rodriguez and a second by Mr. Morrison for the adoption of ordinance 116-2020. Ms. Aug, would you please call the roll?
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Elmore?
Yes.
Coniston?
Yes.
Cantor?
Yes.
Heck?
Yes.
Morrison?
Yes.
Bailey?
Yes. Ordinance number 116-2020 has been adopted. Ordinance 117-2020, approving and making a fund transfer from unappropriated monies in General Fund 101 to the amount of $23,000 to the accrued benefits reserve expense account 505.00.51000, approving a supplemental appropriation in the amount of $23,000 from the accrued benefit reserve fund 505 to the accrued benefit reserve expense account 505.000.51000 and declaring an emergency.
Mr. President, I'd like to introduce ordinance 117-2020, move for the suspension of all rules.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Rodriguez and a second by Mr. Cantor for introduction and suspension of the rules on ordinance number 117-2020. Are there any comments? Ms. Aug, would you please call the roll?
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Elmore?
Yes.
Coniston?
Yes.
Cantor?
Yes.
Heck?
Yes.
Morrison?
Yes.
Bailey?
Yes. Rules have been suspended on ordinance 117-2020.
Move to adopt.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Rodriguez, a second by Mr. Cantor for adoption, the adoption of ordinance 117-2020. Mrs. Aug, would you please call the roll?
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Elmore?
Yes.
Coniston?
Yes.
Cantor?
Yes.
Heck?
Yes.
Morrison?
Yes.
Bailey?
Yes. Ordinance number 117-2020 has passed. It is adopted. Brings us to resolution 40-2020, adopting a resolution in support of the Senate Bill 365 and to urge Governor DeWine and State Legislature of Ohio to extend the deadline for the operating public meetings electronically and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Temp, I'd like to introduce Resolution 40-2020 and lead for the suspension of all the rules, please.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Cantor and a second by Mrs. Heck for suspension of the rules on resolution 40-2020. Any questions or comments? Ms. Aug, would you please call the roll?
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Elmore?
Yes.
Coniston?
Yes.
Cantor?
Yes.
Heck?
Yes.
Morrison?
Yes.
Bailey?
Yes. Rules have been suspended on resolution 40-2020.
Thank you, Mr. Pro Temp. Move to adopt, please.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Cantor and a second by Ms. Heck for the adoption of resolution 40-2020. Ms. Aug, would you please call the roll?
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Elmore?
Yes.
Coniston?
Yes.
Cantor?
Yes.
Heck?
Yes.
Morrison?
Yes.
Bailey?
Yes. Resolution 40-2020 has been adopted. Resolution 41-2020, authorizing the mayor to enter into the Jefferson Township Whitehall Joint Economic Development District Income Tax Collection and Distribution Agreement and declaring an emergency. Resolution 41-2020 is being read by title only. Resolution 42, 2020, resolving to approve then and now certificates and declaring an emergency.
Mr. President, I'd like to introduce resolution 42, 2020, move for the suspension of all rules.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Rodriguez and a second by Mr. Morrison for the suspension of rules on ordinance 42, 2020. Anybody have any questions or comments? Ms. Aug, would you please call the roll?
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Elmore?
Yes.
Coniston?
Yes.
Cantor?
Yes.
Peck?
Yes.
Morrison?
Yes.
Bailey?
Yes. Rules have been suspended on resolution 42, 2020.
Move to adopt.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Rodriguez, a second by Mr. Morrison for the adoption of resolution 42, 2020. Ms. Aug, would you please call the roll?
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Elmore?
Yes.
Coniston?
Yes.
Cantor?
Yes.
Peck?
Yes.
Morrison?
Yes.
Bailey?
Yes. Resolution 42, 2020 has been adopted. And I don't think we have any other poll publics. Is that correct? Brings us to Community Day Board.
They all look at
Up
me.
first.
I'm hoping to have something to announce next week for Christmas. Working on something with WCCA in the schools.
Very good.
Pretty hard to pass out sausage when it's out there in the cold.
It would be very hard for
Very
pancakes
cold.
and sausage, yes.
Santa could stay out there and get his picture.
Right, don't think so, but we got something we're working on.
You need to involve Wes, he's got some good ideas.
He does have good ideas, you're right.
That brings us to poll council then,
Thank God we're moving
unless
on.
anybody has something else for Community Day Board. And we'll start off tonight with Mr. Rodriguez.
Thank you. Just wanted to thank the Megan again for the presentation. That was very, very nice. Do a great job. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. That brings us to Lori Elmore.
Thank you, President Pro Tem. Thank you for, and I appreciate the viewers of Facebook, and also want to comment on the resident poll, and I appreciate the time that was taken to write in. I did want to comment that council did several actions regarding the selling of water and discussions. One of the things that is actually active is very first of any cities, Whitehall was selected and is a part of the juvenile diversion program. And I would say as a city, as a city and a resident of this city, I think it is incumbent upon us, as we've always done, to mentor, direct, coach, and provide our youth direction. And that would be our first step, which is why the diversion program was put in place. It's not to slap somebody on the hand or put them in a criminal justice system, but to correct, to do a 180, to turn around, to turn from the direction that they were heading to make a better choice and to move forward. And I believe that that is what we have done with being a part of that diversion program that actually started with the Franklin County Juvenile and also the Columbus Police Department, October 2019. Whitehall was selected, and we worked and had conversation to be a part of the diversion program, or them coming in and putting together the diversion program for Whitehall. So we have acted, I believe, in the best interest of this city, of our residents, and of the juvenile and our youth, I would say, that represent the city of Whitehall. Although it may not be the direction or the cause and effect that some would want, I believe that we did act proper, rightful, and responsible in making sure that we put together processes to help, coach and put our youth on the right page. So I also want to, just thank everybody for just being concerned and just having a heart for people. In a time like this, I just believe that we need to come together as a city, as a state, as a country, and meet the needs of everybody. This is a very difficult time. And the COVID pandemic is no joke. I just lost somebody very close to me. And I take that, I want everybody to be safe. I want everybody to enjoy family. But be careful, because the actions that we do could have a ripple effect on other people. And so we have to be mindful of other people. That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Lord. Karen?
Thank you. I want to thank everybody for viewing, and of course, we've got Thanksgiving coming upon us, and obviously this year is going to be very, very different looking for many of us. But we certainly have a lot to be thankful for as a community. Everybody remember, this is a moment in time. Things will change, things will get better, and everybody stay well.
Thank you, Karen. That brings us to Wes. Mr. Kinner.
Thank you, Mr. Pro Tem. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in tonight and watching. It was a very good meeting, I thought. Mr. Dixon, thank you for sending your letter back in. We haven't forgotten. I just want you to know that. Megan, I just want to thank you again. I can't thank you enough for the job that you did. The presentation that you did tonight was awesome. It was phenomenal. I learned some. Even though I've been looking over the budget, you actually answered 3 questions for me, and that I was going to talk about next week, but you answered them tonight, and I want to thank you for that. Very informative. You put in a lot of time and effort with our city, and the mayor acknowledged you tonight, and kudos to you. You do a good job. Thank you so much. It was a great hire from Mr. Woodruff and Mayor Maggard. And for all the zeros and things that you had to say tonight, Mr. Pro Tem, I personally thought you did a phenomenal job, and I wanted to thank you.
Well, thank you.
I know it was a lot, and especially, I forget which one it was, but 103. I wish that would have been titled only, so you could have read it maybe a couple of more times for the enjoyment of council. So I want everybody to be safe. The councilperson, Elmore and Coniston said, well, this is a tough time. It's Thanksgiving, you have COVID, be safe, wear your mask, social distance. This is no joke. This is no joke. I know my kids call me all the time wanting to know where I'm at, who I'm with, how close I am to somebody. With that said, Daddy loves you girls. I'll see you in about a half an hour. I'm on my way. That's all I had, Mr. President.
Thank you, Wes. That brings us back to you, Joanna.
Thank you, President Pro Tem. I want to echo what everybody else has already said. Thank you, Megan, for the presentation. It was definitely helpful, I think, to everybody on council, but it was also helpful everybody that is watching live or will watch later on to see what our budget is and just to see a brief overview of it. Thank you, Mr. Dixon, for writing in. I always appreciate full public. And also what everybody else said, I hope everybody has a happy Thanksgiving and a safe one, and just remain safe. That's all.
Thank you, Joanna. Brings us to Councilperson Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would also like to thank everyone for watching. And again, it's repetition, Megan, but thank you not only for the fine job you've done here, but every week we get updates and information, and you keep the city well informed. We really appreciate that. Everybody be safe. Thanks for watching.
Thank you, Larry. Julie, if you would, I would like to just echo everything that Councilperson Elmore said, and I appreciate your comments, Lori. Thank you. That's all we have tonight, unless you guys want to sit here longer.
Mr. Pro Tem, motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Cantor and a second by Ms. Elmore to adjourn.
actually me, she was throwing her voice.
Please call the roll.
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Elmore?
Yes.
Coniston?
Yes.
Cantor?
Yes.
Peck?
Yes.
Morrison?
Yes.
Bailey?
Yes.